Andy, you're on.
Okay. It's my privilege to introduce my great friend and collaborator, Judge Alfred Lambremont Webre. Alfred holds a baccalaureate degree from Yale University and a law degree from Yale Law School. He's a former Fulbright scholar. He has practiced law in both private practice and public law. He was the first general counsel to the Environmental Protection Agency for New York City, and then actually pioneered environmental law during the administration of Mayor John Lindsay of New York. He is a Fulbright scholar, having studied economic development in Uruguay, and is bilingual in English and Spanish as a result of those studies, and also his Cuban heritage on his mother's side. He was born in Pensacola, Florida in the 1940s. And what amazes me about Alfred is he is truly a multi-dimensional luminary. He's one of the great luminaries of our time. He is the founder of the field of exopolitics. He has written several major contemporary works in exopolitics, including not just his work Exopolitics, which I had the privilege of editing with him, which, by the way, was the first book completed by a writer and editor with knowledge that the book had been in the presence of one of the collaborators decades in advance of its completion. I first encountered Exopolitics, Alfred's book, and indeed his name, Alfred Lambremont Webre, when his book was among the books that was a quantum artifact as a result of being taken back in time from sometime after its publication in 2005 to sometime before I encountered it in 1971. So, Alfred's name first entered my consciousness when I was a child on Project Pegasus. So we completed that work in 2005, aware of the fact that it was a time travel artifact that we were completing. His most recent work is his book, The Omniverse, which has material on the secret time travel revolution, the American presence on Mars, and provides, I think, the new framework for understanding the nature of the multiverse that we inhabit. You can find Alfred at exopolitics.com. And once again, it's my high honor and distinct privilege to introduce my dear friend and great collaborator, one of the great intellectuals of our time, Judge Alfred Lambremont Webre.
Yes, thank you, Andy, for that great introduction. I just want to make sure that people can hear my voice and that it's carrying there. Could you raise your hands that you can hear me? Oh, thank you.
We hear you.
Good. I'm now going to start a procedure here that is share screen, and we'll go directly to a PowerPoint that we've started for today. And I just want to make sure that people can see that screen that says Exopolitics and a Positive Future. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Oh, good, good. And so the general theme is that by using the science of exopolitics, which is the science of relations among intelligent civilizations in our universe and our omniverse, we can begin to chart and create a positive future as a conscious, intelligent species in our holographic universe on our, holographic planet space Earth, and in our virtual reality holographic incarnating circumstances. And we have 28 slides that are illustrative of different aspects of that. And we have a total of 75 minutes, so there'll be plenty of time for question and answer at the end. If people would like to, note or any questions that come up about any of the materials at the end, just note them down and we'd be happy to talk about them. So this is more, it's kind of a larger forum, kind of an open forum on exopolitics and a positive future with no topic off the table. Thank you. Now, the first kind of part one of this, and today, now in 2017, I really first got into this in February of 1973. And today, in July 30th, 2017, is my first public presentation of the fact that I'm not only an academic exopolitician, but I'm an extraterrestrial abductee. And I kept that fact non-public all of these years because I did not want to detract on what I call the 3D terrestrial souls exopolitical institution track. And I wanted to be able to lay down the kind of the 3D institutional framework and infrastructure, which I was able to do in 3 books. Andy mentioned Exopolitics, in which we're both time travel entangled, and which was time travel by DARPA CIA from 2005 back to at least 1971. I have dates prior to that that suggest that people such as Arkansas Governor Winthrop Rockefeller, who gang stalked me in the Yale Law School faculty lounge in 1966, had been pre-informed of my pre-identity as a future exopolitical whistleblower. And Governor Rockefeller was a time travel, I call it the chronarchy, the time travel secret government handler for a number of the political actors and exopolitical actors in the chronarchy, including US President Bill Clinton and his spouse, Hillary Clinton, who have been secret actors in the secret space program all along, and we'll be covering some of that. And so, but now I think that with Andy Basiago coming forward and are being able to, he is a material eyewitness to my extraterrestrial abduction in coordination with a linked abduction with US President Jimmy Carter, whose 1977 Carter White House extraterrestrial communication study I served as director, all of which was arranged during the extraterrestrial abductions in 1969 of Carter, 1973 of Weber, and 1975 of Andy Basiago as witness. And so I'd like to start on the slides now to provide more context. Well, just this past week, I was fortunate enough to interview two deep research colleagues of mine, Mary Rodwell and Dr. Marie Batchelor, MD, who is named in her own chapter, chapter 19 in Mary Rodwell's new book, New Humans, Awakening to Our Cosmic Heritage. And this is a very important book. I've Mary Rodwell has been an associate that our research has tracked each other over the years because Mary covers the experiential exopolitical side of things. And I really belong to that wing where I'm an exopolitical scholar who's also an ET abductee and a starseed. So I bring that perspective, even though I've been an undercover guy, so I could walk hidden among the other exopolitical actors who shall remain nameless at conferences, and we wouldn't have the 3D, 5D collisions where sometimes a 3D person is looking at your 5D frequency and gets confused and starts lashing out or getting confused. And so I just decided to avoid all of that interdimensional conflict and frequency until this point when we're having the formal separation of dimensions and New Earth is starting to manifest. So that it's polyfunctional now. But I've spent over 40 years operating consciously in the 3D exopolitical field while having a foot in the 5D exopolitical new world. And that came about because of the following thing that you will see. I was afforded that privilege because of ethical extraterrestrials who abducted or adducted Jimmy Carter, Alfred Webre, and Andy Basiago in a series of linked extraterrestrial abductions from the years 1969 to 1975. And in her new book, A New Human, Mary Rodwell talks about the difference between abductions and adductions. It's just a change of one letter, and it's from a B to a D, adductions. And there's kind of a pun there, which we'll talk about, because ADD is also attention deficit disorder. And many of the new starseeds are accused of having attention deficit disorder. And it's not that, it's that they're trying to translate 5D frequencies into the 3D, the arch 3D educational system that has been designed by the Draco reptilian and Orion Gray and Anunnaki reptilian controlled educational matrix that has been designed purposely to deconstruct their higher DNA 5D matrix. So that's the collision there. So abductions, that's kind of the pun there. Now, in this book, in the introduction, researchers R. Leo Sprinkley, Professor Sprinkle, who also wrote an introduction to my book, Exopolitics, quotes the late Roger Lear, Dr. Roger Lear, writing in an introduction to The New Human by Mary Rodwell, that quote, Mary Rodwell found that many ET, quote, abduction participants changed their viewpoints about these encounters. This is very important. They were not abducted, i.e. taken away from Earth. They were adducted, i.e. taken toward the stars. From a multidisciplinary perspective, many participants, and I can vouch, including yours truly, viewed themselves as developing a multidimensional perspective about their encounters with ETs. We kind of bonded with the ETs and became more ET-like. And I think that that was the whole purpose. One of the purposes of these ET abductions with Carter, with Weber, and with Basiago was that all three of these individuals who were being prepared in this program which the ethical extraterrestrials have to identify humans that are concerned about the long-term welfare of the human population on Earth and in the cosmos, and to really prepare them and give them more capacity building to fulfill their planetary and cosmological tasks. And so to ourselves, the abductees, these encounters with ETs are viewed as physical, biological, psychological, and spiritual events. And their effect was to develop a purpose or a personal mission to assist Earth and humanity. Now, who were or who are the ETs behind the Carter, Weber, Basiago abductions? And we're just one test case. I mean, Philip Kraft, who was an editor of the LA Times for many decades, became an abductee of civilization he calls the Verdants, and wrote a book about it. The Verdants may or may not be kind of a front name or a disguised name, a pseudonym. And he says, well, I was taken up there. We had meetings in auditoriums with a lot of other people. One of my colleagues was taken up to Phil Kraft's ship and was up there, a very close colleague of mine. And, you know, they used to go up there for lectures and get-togethers, and they were all prepared. And so a working hypothesis from eyewitness and documentary evidence is that the ETs behind the abductions of Jimmy Carter, Andy Basiago, and Alfred Weber in this 1969 to 75 period leading up to the 1977 Carter White House ET study may have been, number one, the short grays of the variety that Susan Hansen, head of UFO New Zealand, experienced, who were involved in introducing her to the soul of her future son aboard a gray ET craft when she was 8, and then implanting her with her son's soul in the fetus in her womb when she was married and pregnant. And that son now is a young lawyer in his 30s in New Zealand and is leading a very exemplary life. And Suzanne Hansen is head of UFO Focus in New Zealand and has worked with the military, the New Zealand Air Force, and they're doing early disclosure. And so she's a real, and she has a dual, she says that she has a dual gray human soul. So there you have, the grays have been subcontracted the tasks into the human reincarnation system, and they're involved in a positive reincarnation cycle, taking advanced gray human souls and introducing them into societies to elevate the frequency here on Earth. Very much different from, and at the same time, very much congruent with many of the religious and philosophical organizations, texts, and dogmas on Earth. And we can see why we need a lot of time and discussion with the religions and the faithful on the science of exopolitics and what people believe in their texts, which may not be scientifically correct. And that's a drawing done by Suzanne Hansen's husband, who is an artist, from when one of the procedures, they have a special gray comes in and helps merge the soul of her son, who she had first met on the gray ET craft when she was 8 years old, and her son was a ball of light, and they played together. They determined that they were compatible, and later, when she was married and pregnant, she was teleported up to the ship, and the soul merging into the fetus in her womb began. So that's one possible option, and that's science-based, You can go more in depth into this case at Exopolitics TV on YouTube. You can go into it at exopolitics.com. You can also go into it in the book, The Omniverse. There's a whole chapter on this case at available at exopolitics.com or any bookstore. It's now out in German editions and Hungarian issues, and it'll be out in Spanish shortly, and Portuguese, we hope. Okay, so what other ETs could they have been? Well, they could have been members of the Regional Galactic Governance Council. The ETs that abducted Carter, Weber, and Basiago could have been upper dimensional human ET members of the Regional Galactic Governance Council, in other words, Pleiadians, Alpha Centaurians, Sirians, and others that created Homo sapiens sapien and unshielded themselves over New York City on October 13th, 2010, the day before the UN Outer Space Conference discussed the protocols for greeting extraterrestrial civilizations. And the council was in interdimensional communication with Stanley Fulham, a Canadian lifelong NORAD officer, about cleaning up the environment, appearing at the UN, and announced that they would appear on October 13th, 2010. So all of this was fulfilled. I was able to interview Stanley Fulham. I had the last interview while he was alive. He was given fast-acting cancer and died in the latter part of the year of 2010. He was given that cancer by the draconian forces, some human intelligence agency acting on behalf of the draconian force, who do not want the upper dimensional life forces to really aid the humans and clean up the environment, but rather are in favor of the transhumanist agenda, which is an alliance of the invading sentient bad AI, the predatory bad AI, the Draco reptilians, the Orion Greys, and the Anunnaki reptilians, among others, and that gained and have prospered under a pedocriminal matrix that was legislatively put into place by the secret 1954 Greada treaties, unwittingly signed by President Eisenhower in 1954, and then not so unwittingly updated by pedo President George H.W. Bush of Skull and Bones, which is really the second chapter of the Bavarian Illuminati, founded in 1776, a year after Adams Weishaupt founded his in 1775. I know that because I'm a graduate of the university, Yale, that founded, where that was founded. I was a member of Torch and Talon, an underground secret society, and Skull and Bones infiltrated Torch and Talon on my night. And one of my bloodline ancestors was the founder of the Yale Divinity School. So our bloodline has been in this fight for a long time. Okay, so who else could have been the ETs? Well, it could have been any other type of ethical interdimensional human ET. The ETs, human or otherwise, could have been interdimensional ETs from multiple research case studies with adoptees set out in the works of authors Mary Rodwell or Miguel Mendoza. or other authors who specialize in ET abductions. Miguel has written a whole number of books, Meet the Hybrids, The Lives and Missions of ET Ambassadors on Earth. We Are the Disclosure, Parts 1 and 2, 700 Years of Research on ET Human Interaction and Being with the Beings, the How and Why of ET Contact. Those are his 4 most recent books. I have a chapter in there in We Are the Disclosure, talking about the Omniverse model, but these are 4 books chock full of interaction with abductees, and because we're all part of the messengers to the Earth, the high frequency star seeds that are at the other end of the guys that are trying to take 3D and push it into lower frequencies. Now, so let's come down to the nub of part 1. Ethical ETs abduct Jimmy Carter, Alfred Webre, and Andy Basiago, 1969 to 75. And I'm so glad that Andy's here in the audience, because you can ask him questions after this, and you can ask him and get him on mic, on tape, so the record is there. Now, you have to reframe here. So I'm really asking people to just sit back and chill and let go of a lot of preconceptions that they may have about 3D framings and all of that. And in terms of 3 ET abductions, reframe Jimmy Carter as an early indigo starseed, Alfred Webre as an early indigo starseed, and Andy Basiago as an early crystal child starseed. And by my research, you will really have the essence of those 3 actors. And I'll show you why. US President Jimmy Carter, Alfred Lambremont Webre, and US Chrononaut Andrew D. Basiago were reportedly abducted by the same ethical extraterrestrials during the period 1969 to 75. Alfred's surmise is that Jimmy Carter's 1969 close encounter and missing time abduction, Alfred's 1973 ET encounter and missing time abduction, and Andy Basiago's 1975 ET abduction and witnessing of Alfred's 1973 ET abduction were about the following. Number 1, coordinating the election of President Jimmy Carter as an ET disclosure president. Because starting in 1973, I became, I went almost overnight because of my 1973 abduction to being like a major ET writer, media figure on national television, and reporting on the 1976 race with Jimmy Carter and his support of the ET issue. Number 2, coordinating the 1977 Carter White House ET study, of which Alfred would become director, so that in the abductions where the ETs had Jimmy Carter and then they had Alfred Webre, in those abductions, we had downloads and meetings and movies or whatever. I can remember movies, and I'm going to go into intense, now that I've come out publicly, I'm going to go into intense processes to recover these memories. about coordinating everything that we did from 73 forward and from 69 forward to have Jimmy Carter elected against the Rockefeller favorite or the military favorite, Gerald Ford, or the reptilian favorite, who was a member of the Warren Commission and who had brought on the former Defense Department Secretary McNamara, who had been brought by Ford after the 1973 UFO flap in Michigan. Ford was a congressman from Michigan as a principal witness and who testified, oh yes, Congressman, all those UFOs in Michigan were the result of swamp gas, and we in the Pentagon can testify to that. So against that, Jimmy Carter in 76 said, no, I'm filing my UFO sighting report, which happened in 69. He filed it in 73, and then he ran on it in 76 and on a ticket that said, if I get in, we're going to open it up. And we coordinated a lot of this on the ships. And I was coordinating the study afterward, which we'll get to in a minute. In the long run, the Carter, Basiago, and Weber ET abductions may have been about coordination of Jimmy Carter's election as an ET disclosure president and Andy Basiago's possible future election as an ET disclosure president, which had reportedly been pre-identified by DARPA CIA time travel, according to Project Pegasus time travel officers. We have to look at quantum and abduction entanglement. Alfred was director of President Carter's 1977 White House ET study and has had a time travel quantum entanglement with Andy Basiago since 1971, when DARPA time traveled his book, Exopolitics, from 2005 back to 1971. And he has had an ET abduction entanglement since 1975, when the ETs who abducted Alfred showed Andy the images of Alfred's 1973 ET abduction aboard their spaceship as an eyewitness. Now you can see we've documented this, what we were instructed to do in 2015. I was instructed telepathically to document all of this, and you can see the documented context and backstory footnoted in a 750-page book that's available in ebook, Kindle for a very reasonable price, as well as in hardcover, called Journey. It's at exopolitics.com, it's at Amazon, and it's wherever else, you know, all those places. And you can also find this, a lot of pieces of this at exopolitics.com and various other websites. Now, let's get more deeply into Jimmy Carter's close encounter of the fourth kind. That's what they call ET abductions or ET adductions. So the actual date, and this is an image of Jimmy Carter's 1973 UFO sighting report, which he personally filed during his race electoral campaign for governor of Georgia. The actual date of his sighting, his close encounter of the first kind, was January 69, in the company of 10 members of the Leary, Georgia Lions Club. There's a lot of confusion that has come up. We have on exopolitics.com published a composite of articles with leading exopolitical analysts, including Grant Cameron, John Kelly, myself. Here is some of the significant objective scientific evidence of John Kelly, who is a leading, if not the leading, one of the leading reverse speech specialists on the planet. The questioner, you have listened backwards to the speeches of people describing contact with spacecraft from other civilizations. What did you find out? John Kelly. When President Jimmy Carter told reporters late last year that he didn't think flying saucers were the vehicles of space people visiting the Earth, I played his speech in reverse and heard the words, quote, saucer, went out naked, going out, they'll put him in it. Although it was part of his campaign process, this message made me wonder if the president had more personal reasons for sending Alfred Webre to SRI in the 1970s in order to release the government's secret research on extraterrestrials. From my reading of the message, it describes Carter as a potential abductee, end of quote. And for more depth, you can go to exopolitics.com and you'll see a composite of articles by Grant Cameron, John Kelly, and myself, in which the consensus is that Carter has not recovered his memories, that he is most plausibly an ET abductee, both by this evidence and by behavioral evidence, because ET abductees remain extremely emotionally sensitive. And by his descriptions, his lifelong excitement about his descriptions of his, quote, encounter with the saucer on January 6, 1969, as bright and larger than the moon, the way he's described it throughout his whole life to his mother and in public and in the Atlanta Constitution, all are congruent with the profile of an abductee and not a mere contactee. So he had what's called a missing time experience, which is what we all have. Okay, so the 1977, again, for the backstory, go to exopolitics.com and my 750 page most recent book, just published now in 2017, called Journey. You can download it at exopolitics.com and amazon.com. We'll give you the whole backstory on this. 1977 Carter White House extraterrestrial communication study was conceived at a transition dinner, 1976 private dinner that I was invited to with members of Carter's inner circle at a townhouse on Capitol Hill. I was invited by a prominent attorney from Atlanta at a prominent Atlanta firm owned by lawyers whose son I went to prep school together with in Washington, D.C. And that lawyer called me in New York and asked to meet me at the Carlisle Hotel right after I had helped Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez get the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the U.S. Congress to investigate the assassinations, the political assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and others started. And he met with me and said, I'm here on behalf of President-elect Carter. This was during the transition. And because of my relationship with Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez, the chairman of the committee, he said that President Carter wants to be kept informed. And so I said, fine. And then the lawyer later invited me to this transition meeting. And at the transition meeting, these were members of the inner circle. The inner circle, they called them JC and the 12 apostles, even though some of the 12 apostles were not there, but they called Carter Peanut. And they asked me, you gonna work with Peanut? You know, it was kind of like the inner circle before all of the Rockefeller, people had infiltrated. And I got the intuitive flash that night that what had to happen, and this was probably insight that had came to me from all of the arrangements that we had been doing during the ET abductions of the Carter White House extraterrestrial studies. So immediately after that, my very good friend, Mary Schoonmaker, was a friend of Ingo Swann, and Mary and I went down to Ingo Swann's loft in the Bowery. Ingo was a subject of Hal Puthoff and Russ Targ's study on remote viewing at SRI that was funded by the CIA. I was headed back to the Bay Area that Christmas of 1976 because Teresa and the mother of Freddie, my son, Teresa and Freddie were there, so I was going to visit them, and they were visiting their family, their Teresa's sister. And so I took advantage and then called up Hal Puthoff and Russ Targ. They invited me over. It turned out that Bill Targ, who was the editor-in-chief of G.P. Putnam's, had been the editor of my book, my first book called The Age of Cataclysm, which was the integration of parapsychology and the psychic predictions of Edgar Cayce. So it was like this synchronistic melange happening. And I explained to them that I had met with Carter's inner circle and would like to go forward on a civilian, non-reptilian, lights-based study, ET study of the extraterrestrial presence. And so Russ and Hal Puthoff said, you should probably call the Futurist Center under Peter Schwartz. There are about a half a dozen leading futurists there. So it's a Center for the Study of Social Policy. So I called it up. Peter Schwartz, they set up an interview. I explained it. And they said, okay. A little while later, they offered me a job. I moved everything out to, I left my loft on Green Street, had a beautiful loft in Green and in the Green and Houston, Soho area. And we moved out to Palo Alto and Menlo Park in SRI. Now, we started the Carter White House extraterrestrial study there. And later in 1977, after Carter's inauguration, and we started into the study, after I had official SRI approval, the Carter ET study was presented to and developed with the approval of interested White House staff under Stuart E. Eisenstadt, Domestic Policy Advisor and Executive Director of the Domestic Policy Staff. And that was here. If you look at this photo, right behind it is called the Eisenhower Executive Office Building. And so all my names, all my signatures going in and out will be there as evidence. And we met with a female staffer who we had been directed to because she was a UFO and ET enthusiast. She totally supported President Jimmy Carter's decision to open the UFO files, and she had been the designated Jimmy Carter staff person to carry this project, and I had been directed to her by this through the Jimmy Carter network that goes back to this transition dinner that I was at in December 1976. Okay, and that went along just fine from the period of May 1977 until the fall of 1977. Specifically October 1977, following a meeting in October 77 after I got explicit approval from the White House for the project. I had a meeting with an Assistant Secretary of Defense on space-based platforms for space-based weapons at the inner ring of the Pentagon, Ring E. And during that meeting, as set out in my Disclosure Project sworn affidavit, I'm a Disclosure Project witness, and on May 9th, 2001, the official press release of the Disclosure Project press conference at the National Press Club went out under two names, Dr. Stephen Greer and Alfred Lambremont Webre as former director of the 1977 Carter White House extraterrestrial study. It went out under two names, okay? So I just want that as an historical record. And all of this is documented in my book Journey with the full footnotes so that people understand the documentation that is accompanying this and that I think is necessary for historical clarity and cleaning up of the path and getting all kinds of AI nanobots out of our exopolitical history. Now, Carter study was abruptly terminated at a high-level executive meeting at SRI, during which the Pentagon DOD liaison flew out from Washington to SRI and stated that if this project went forward, all DOD research funds to SRI, which was 25% of their $100 million budget, their budget now is up around $800 million a year, would be terminated, quote, because there are no UFOs. So they came out and just, just stopped that project. And the reptilian, the men in black, and the reptilian forces inside the Pentagon had won. And our attempt to get a ethical, upper dimensional, light-based human extraterrestrial study was defeated, or at least put temporarily on hold. Let's put it that way. Now, enter Andrew D. Basiago, because he's a material witness and because on a parallel tracks, he and I were becoming quantum entangled both in time travel around books and in extraterrestrial abduction, purposefully. And so this is Andrew D. Basiago's statement on June 4th, 2017. Andrew D. Basiago. And Andy is a member of the bar of the state of Washington. So making these statements carries a great degree of professional responsibility. I had numerous ET encounters in childhood and have even lectured about them publicly. I have discussed how I have speculated that these were prompted by my involvement in time travel, which placed me in the quantum realm that I operate in. One abduction in 1975 involved meeting Alfred Lambremont Webre and another future friend and colleague in exopolitics, the filmmaker Tanya Maderford. This was discussed between us in 2006 when we were working on a film project together. I have never met President Carter, but did attend a speech he gave in LA on May 5th, 1979. So I can't confirm the part about Carter being an abductee or my abductions connected to him. I can say that ufology shows that many who have UFO sightings later prove to be abductees. I can also say that in one abduction, I remember that Alfred was in. I am 100% sure it was him. He was standing in a metal cylinder inside the ship. It was as if I was being given the opportunity to be able to later confirm his status as an abductee. And so there is counselor and abductee and chrononaut and pre-identified future US president Andrew D. Basiago making an eyewitness statement in a multidimensional exopolitical context. It continues. Andrew D. Basiago, for me, this solves a long-standing mystery as to why the CIA betrayed Carter in 1978 and backed Reagan. There is now the real possibility that they did so because they discovered that Carter was an abductee. Having worked on 2 classified US defense projects, I can say that the US defense mechanism was profoundly consternated by the ET presence because they didn't know who the ETs were, where they were from, or what they wanted. And so, now we get to a bit of my testimony. The 1975 Carter White House extraterrestrial study. The 1977 Carter White House ET study. Had it not been terminated by the Pentagon and Men in Black, if you go to Journey, you'll see there's a whole scenarios there where after I was hit with directed energy weapons at the inner ring of the Pentagon, they had Men in Black come out and attack me at Washington National Airport inside the passenger lounges as I was waiting. And I had taken my tennis racket because with a friend, I used to play tennis at Judge Alfred Friendly's house. He had a tennis court in his backyard. And I used that tennis racket in the form of a Jedi Knight to fight off those dastardly Men in Black. White Jedi Knights versus the Men in Black. How is that history to be understood in conventional exopolitics? Now, US President Dwight D. Eisenhower originally signed these treaties with the Draco reptilians, Orion Greys, and Anunnaki reptilians in 1954. These ETs abused the treaties into a planetary and galactic pedocriminal trade of millions of human children and adults annually for ritual sacrifice, loosh, cannibalism, body parts, all enforced by the US government and pedocriminal institutional New World Order worldwide, because the Pentagon unlawfully terminated the 1977 Carter White House extraterrestrial study. US President George H.W. Bush signed the Tau 9 Treaty with the Draco, Orion Greys, and Anunnaki, and the pedocriminal abuses on Earth have become exponentially worse. Those are the words of Alfred Lambremont Webre Director, 1977 Carter White House extraterrestrial study. And in the image, you see Judge Alfred Lambremont Webre of the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal passing judgment on Bush, Blair, found guilty of war crimes in Malaysia, tribunal for war crimes in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in Guantanamo, Cuba, donde he vivido. The judgment came down, and now Bush, W. Bush, G.W. Bush, Blair, Cheney cannot travel outside of the United States where they're protected by the CIA. And that judgment came down on November 22nd, 2011, the 48th anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, an upper dimensional, light, human, starseed hero, while George H.W. Bush, by the evidence of Ola Damagard and others, directed the shooter team in the Daltex building next to the Texas State School Book Depository. So on that anniversary, as a judge, I was able to bring down at least a partial related judicial judgment on a date relevant to George W. Bush, who knowingly signed the Tau 9 Treaty. So there is a legal connection here. So we will continue on our quest to abrogate these two unlawful treaties. So there is justice in exopolitics. It is not all pie in the sky and airy-fairy. Now, what is the evidence that DARPA CIA time-traveled pre-identified Trump as a future US president? And just today I had to answer, they said, well, Trump is just another reptilian, like Bush 1, Bill Clinton, Bush 2, and Obama. And no, the finding has been by some experts that Trump is not an incarnate reptilian. He's an incarnate human. US presidents George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama were also pre-identified by secret presidential time travel pre-identified program, according to Andrew D. Basiago, former Chrononaut and 2016 presidential candidate. This is from an article, a NewsInsideOut.com article that we wrote in June 2016 of the 2016 campaign and published shortly before the election on November 3rd, 2016. We held it back then. This was an editorial decision that we made because we did not want to rob people of their free will by saying as early as June 2016 that that Trump had already been pre-identified as the 2016 elected political president. Chrononaut. So I'll just say that we're beginning to run out of time. So you can go to NewsInsideOut.com and read that there, and also exopolitics.com. And it puts a whole new slant on this. Now, let's get to part two. How do we change our current situation and get back on the positive timeline that we were before 1954 and Ike got duped? Ike and the US government got duped and got forced into signing the Greada Treaty with the Dracos and the Orion Greys instead of the good treaty for giving up nuclear war with the upper dimensional humans. We'll have a petition. It's called Abrogate This. And it's to abrogate the secret Greada and Tauwein treaties and end the pedocriminal matrix on Earth. And, you know, in the interest of total disclosure, I am a victim of childhood sexual abuse by an organized pedocriminal ring in rural Cuba at the age of 7. This pedocriminal ring was organized by a Danish engineer who was a member of the Danish underground. And, you know, so I just want to say that that's kind of where I'm really like, gung-ho on this stuff. And so President Donald J. Trump's comfort level with abrogating international treaties makes him the perfect person to end the horror of child sex abuse and human trafficking that is haunting the globe. After canceling US participation in the TPP and the Paris climate change protocols, a new president has an opportunity to terminate the pedocriminal networks that currently dominate many governmental and religious institutions. Those familiar with the secret Greada Treaty of 1954 that President Eisenhower signed with the Draco reptilians and Orion Greys are probably also familiar that it has been violated and abused by ET participants and pedocriminal humans who have used its provisions to create a worldwide network of pedocriminals embedded in the highest echelons of power. This is page 1 of 3 of a letter that accompanies the petition. This tragedy can be constrained and hopefully ended if President Trump keeps his repeated promises to deal with child sex trafficking and other abuses of children that he made during the campaign and recently. Now, you can go and sign this petition and pass it on at positivefuture.info and at change.org. Everything that you see in the news about Russia, all of that, that is just a destabilization program by the Draco pedo forces to get Trump out. The astrology is that he's a Sun King Chinese dog. He barks a lot, so everybody gets upset. But he's in for the full 8 years. And if we can get this to him, some people have gotten it directly to Roger Stone already. So we'll have to see. But you know, there's a good chance. Now, here we are in part 3, and we have 15 minutes. And part 3 is the ascending new Earth. And this is, you all know about the secret, the cosmic secret embedded in the yin-yang symbol. Well, the cosmic secret is that that's a code for our secret dual sun system. The 2 yin-yang symbols, those are our 2 suns, and they circle around each other like 2 yin-yangs in a yin-yang symbol. And that is deep esoteric knowledge that is known very well in the inner earth, and that is being surfaced now. And I'm sorry that we're running out of time. I had originally 2 hours, and then just a perfect storm came up that I could not be there physically this time. But here we have these are from teachings that have not been in the surface world for about 2,500 years, and that you can go to Exopolitics TV and NewsInsideOut.com and exopolitics.com, and they're taught by Sheldon Moore, a Canadian researcher and author. And they teach the 25,000-year dual sun cycle. And in the larger cycles, which is the the Kalpa, the larger 4.32 billion year cycle. But basically, I'll just kind of chip it here. And we've just published a 5-part series. Each part is 90 minutes long that goes through and explains the entire dual sun cycle. And just go to exopolitics.com, go to exopolitics.com, get it Exopolitics TV, and it's all there. But this is basically the dual sun cycle, and you've got one sun here, and you've got the other sun here. And when they're farthest away, they're 12,500 years from each other. That's the precession of the equinoxes time. And when they're farthest away from each other, they're in what's called the Kali Yuga, which is one part virtue and 3 parts sin. Things are really horrible on Earth because they're farthest away from each other. And that's like the Dark Ages. And that's when they crucified Christ. And we went through this horrible stuff. We have just come out of the Dwapara Yuga, of the Kali Yuga, and we're entering now the Dwapara Yuga, which is over here, which is 2 parts virtue and 2 parts sin. And that's why, like, things seem like we're ascending. And oh, it's really, so we're about things. We're about 10,000 years away from the suns being closest to each other. And we'll be entering the golden age about here. And the golden age, ironically, is when the suns are closest to each other. And that's when a lot of physical damage occurs. And that's when the mythology of Planet X and the dual suns coming in. But those are really apocryphal corruptions of the secret dual sun cycle. So we're about 10,000 years away from the golden age paradox, the 2 suns come together. Now, in terms of the new Earth, and I've got about 10 minutes, this is a dialogue from a starseed that Mary Rodwell is speaking to. She says, my understanding, this is the starseed that is going up to the ships. There is a new Earth, but it's not necessarily new. We are just moving into a new vibration, but it is new to us. It's been there for a long time. It is waiting for our arrival. Gaia is already at the destination she wishes to be. She is waiting for us to move with her. Gaia is moving into another frequency or another dimension. She is moving into a higher frequency, a collection of similar frequencies. That's all we are in, actually, a collection of vibrations. Very quickly, people want to know, what is the Omniverse? Well, we'll start with its basic components. The universe is a holographic virtual reality machine for incarnations of souls for ongoing development. In this temporal reality cycle of ordinary conventional history, these Sumerian astronomers first developed it 3,500 to 3,200 BC. The multiverse was coined in 1895 by the American psychologist and philosopher William James, meaning the totality of all universes, encompassing all time, energy, space, and matter. We now can talk about the spiritual dimensions because scientifically we can measure it. And now we have instrumental time transcommunication, and we have the chronovisor, which ironically can take you to scenes along all timelines in our holographic time-space universe, and also in the afterlife dimension. And you're seeing a photograph of a chat with people in the afterlife dimension, which you can go to at itcbridge.com. So we're now dealing with scientific data. And the Omniverse is basically Omniverse equals multiverse plus spiritual dimensions. And we can bring that in now because it's not faith-based, it's science-based. And a core mission of the Omniverse is the creation and development of souls and spiritual beings, and the intelligent community of souls and spiritual beings, along with Source and God, collectively create and maintain the totality of the universes of space, matter, and energy in the exopolitical dimensions of the multiverse. The universes and the multiverse are machines for the development of souls. And as you get more into the science of the Omniverse, there are things that are useful, but like the dimension-based typology of intelligent civilizations. There's a lot of learning there about the good AI, the bad AI, which is an invading AI. Scientist Klaus Vella, who has pioneered on identifying the bad AI versus the good AI. The bad AI wants to essentially terraform this planet into a cyborg AI-based planet where it is God. And that's what the transhumanist agenda is about. And so we're in a holographic universe with a multi-dimensional effect. And I didn't have the privilege of attending the symposium in person, so I didn't see the dialogue with some of the participants like Randy Kramer and Simon Parks and Andy Basiago. But here's a quote. Actually, folks, I have to cop to being a bit of a 5-planet Gemini. The truth is that I believe, as I wrote yesterday, the multidimensional effect. Also be mindful of the multidimensional effect in which Andy Basiago, Lord Eisenhower, and Randy Kramer, and even Simon Parks and Alfred Lambremont Webre are each sourcing their own multidimensional reality, which is sovereign and correct to them. You see, we don't really know what is sourcing Randy Kramer or anyone else's holographic reality. Any one of our realities may have been infiltrated and or infected by a predatory AI intelligence whose real goal is to cause dissociation and conflictual perception amongst humans. And that's just a screenshot from a 2015 very interesting roundtable in which Captain Randy Kramer and Counselor Simon Parks and I participated on the subject of Randy Kramer on Mars, Simon Parks' identity as a mantid with a lot of reptilian interface, and his reading on Randy Kramer as a reptilian. So you may want to go back and look at that because of all the multi-dimensional effects. That's all I'm saying, of the type of evidence that we have in this field. Here, you know, what we have on the planet now is a massive AI, PPAI, pathogenic predatory AI infestation. The PPAI, the bad AI, sentient, inorganic, invading, pathogenic, predatory AI infestation. You can go to exopolitics.com. On the right-hand menu, you can see over 10 panels, 25 articles studying the bad AI, the good AI, and the bad AI invaded. It was plasma-based. It set up plasma-based devices and technology, nanotech, nanobots in chemtrails to do the DNA cyborg terraforming and transformation of humans at the DNA level. And then plasma-based, it set up the internet, which is plasma-based, as a bad AI, which now the good AI is trying to take back. And it set up your phones, which is why if you see all the people in the urbans looking at the phones all the time, it's not that they're so great, it's that the plasma-based AI is more powerful than the human mind and is terraforming them and is becoming God to them. So I hope to be making a movie out of all of this because we have a tremendous amount of research that has to come out. The good news is that we're going through a density shift, creating a positive future. We have developed a positive future equation, which is positive future equals a positive timeline. And the positive timeline we showed you through that secret dual sun 25,000 year Yuga cycle. And hey, we've got a lot of new projects starting. exouniversity.org, which is a British Columbia charitable society. We'll be starting up online courses and symposiums in these areas. We'll be holding symposiums, physical conferences and symposiums in British Columbia. So you guys can come up across the border and taste a little bit of the New Earth vibe. It's a different vibe from the US. Yes, we do have Peter Pan and Tinker Bell as Prime Minister and First Lady, and it's not a New World Order pantomime. That's my judgment. And so we'll have welcome to Exo University here, teaching exosciences, sci-sciences, exopolitics, the Omniverse science, cosmology, secret space program, and exoconsciousness. And you can go to exopolitics.com, amazon.com, any bookstore, and get what I call the Omniverse trilogy. It's a magic triangle you can walk through into the fifth dimension, New Earth. First book is Exopolitics, Founded the Science of Relations Among Intelligent Civilization. In the Multiverse, DARPA, CIA time travel, the book, back from 2005 to 1971. And they actually met with me in 1971, 50 members of the DARPA CIA time travel team met with me and had me give them unwittingly a lecture in protecting the environment while they gang stalked me and made faces at me because they had time travel surveyed me in the future. And they were kind of setting me up for Jimmy Carter and Andy and I to do our exopolitical dog and pony show like we're doing today. The Omniverse is a book that I totally recommend to you. It's published by Inner Traditions, Bear and Company. It's edited by the same person who edited a Nobel Prize winner author that they have. It documents the 2014 co-discovery of the Omniverse, which is the third major cosmological body through which humanity understands the cosmos after the universe and the multiverse. And then finally, the most recent book, published in 2017, is Journey, and it documents the ET abductions of President Jimmy Carter, Alfred Lambremont Webre, and I didn't know about Andy's, but it documents everything through all of the time travel, et cetera, and sets out a path for a positive future. Thank you for your kind and generous attention. I'm sorry that we ran out of time, so it doesn't look like we have time for Q&A. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Alfred. Alfred, I was asked by the house here to just provide a little bit of background information as to how I was able to identify you as a contact agent in Abduction. What happened is that in 2006, Alfred and I partnered with Tanya Maidenford, who would go on to produce Packing for Mars with Frank Jacob, among other accomplishments in film. And I realized that out of the 7 billion people in the world, 3 of us were working on a project called Experience, which is pretty much like the documentary Fast Walkers. It was a set of talking and interviews with different leading lights in exopolitics. We're going to intersperse it with information about ET contact and so forth. And I realized that in 1975, at age 14, I had had a psychological abduction while dreaming, where I was brought aboard an ET craft in a blue shaft of light, somewhere in the country, possibly back in the East Coast. At this time, I was living in California. And when I was brought into the entry area at the bottom of the ship, that many people report was sort of airport-like furniture, there was a 6-year-old blonde girl child who was holding a Barbie doll by its leg, who said to me in reference to the doll she was holding, "My Barbie is a blondie too." This is 1975, 31 years before the 3 of us would partner on that film project. And so we speculated that it was Tanya as a 6-year-old, because I was born in 1961, Tanya in 1969. I'm 8 years older. I was 14 in 1975 when I was having a psychological abduction, and Tanya was 6. After being abducted myself in this psychological abduction in 1975, I then found myself landing in Idaho and seeing a traumatic scenario in the life of a child in which this blonde female child found her pet cow hanging from her swing set behind her Idaho house. I saw her confrontation with the body of this cow that had just been butchered to feed her family. I saw her run around her house, run in front of the house. I saw her mother at the screen door run after the child, take the child into the living room, and then I was in the living room as her father, who had butchered this cow, was explaining to her that he had to feed the family, and this is where beef comes from, where hamburger comes from, and he was trying to console the child. During the partnership with Alfred and Tanya, I had the opportunity to compare notes with Tanya, and this had happened to her at age 6. It was the trauma of her childhood, this accidental discovery of the body of her pet cow hanging from her swing set. It was profoundly affecting trauma in her background. And when I was then taken aboard the ship after seeing this scenario in Idaho, I asked the ETs, "Where are we? Are we still above the continental United States?" And they said, "Yes," telepathically. And I said, "Where?" And they said, "Idaho." I then went somewhere else in the country, I don't know where, and the ship landed, and I was permitted to see another lenticular craft with a kind of cylindrical object extruding out of the bottom of the craft. I walked over to it. I can't really tell whether the craft was hovering or had landed on the ground. But I went underneath this lenticular extraterrestrial craft, and there was an individual standing inside of a metallic cylinder containment vessel that had holes in it so the individual could breathe. They were in a hypnotic trance, and it was when I edited Alfred's book Exopolitics in 2005 that I realized it was Alfred in 1975. It was him. And when Alfred began establishing these linkages with the study that he and John Kelly did of President Carter's statements about his ET sighting in 1969, I realized that the ETs had gone 31 years forward in time and had identified the film project that linked Alfred and Tanya Nunn, even though the film never got made. It's never been broadcast out into the universe because the film was never made. Imagine the level of intelligence it would take to identify 3 human beings out of 7 billion, 31 years before they began discussing a project about extraterrestrial visitation to Earth. But I am 100% certain that it was a young Tanya and a relative Alfred as a young man. In other words, I had contact at that time when Tanya was 6, and I guess Alfred was about, in his early 30s, 32, 33 years of age. The photographs that Alfred provided me of his career, especially around the time of the 1977 Carter White House ET Human Communication Protocol, directly corresponded to the young man that I saw in the psychological abduction standing in this metallic cylinder beneath one of the ET ships. So I had to come forward and corroborate the fact that I'm certain, I have 100% certainty that it was Alfred and Tanya 31 years before we would work together. The other very conspicuous element of this, which I think Alfred touched on briefly, is that prior to his work on the 1977 Carter White House ET Human Communication Protocol, I had studied over 2,000 symbols in the Astarte alphabet, going back to fall of 1971, under DARPA, to communicate with extraterrestrials. So even though I was only 14 in 1975, when I had this astral contact with Tanya and Alfred, nonetheless, I had already worked on what Alfred would then distinguish himself on, which is the subject of ET human communication. So just wanted to clarify those points. We've run out of time. Alfred, thank you so very much for your brilliant presentation, and I wish everybody
Thank you.
a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred. Thank you, Alfred. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
All right.